Hello, my name is Marcus and welcome to Tabletop Reviews, where today I'm doing a full-on review of Heat. I have talked about Heat Pillars on Metal in 5 games I've played before, and I can't remember if the first expansion, Heavy Rain, if I talked about that one in my expansion extravaganza. But today I'm trying to do a full review of it. Of course, I'm not going to do the solo mode or the sort of campaign mode. Those are not game modes that I play. If you're wondering what I mean by campaign mode, I am talking about the thing where you race multiple races, right? That's sort of a campaign mode. But I will talk about the garage module and the weather module as well, because those you can involve. And I will of course be talking about both expansions, Heavy Rain and Tunnel Vision, and talking about different maps. But let's get it to the table and see how it's set up and played. Alright, base game. Let me try and fit as much into the picture as possible. First remove all these rule books, and the first thing I have to show right out the box is each player gets this little thing for their front of them. I'm just gonna grab the red one here and the rest I'm gonna put aside, but you would of course need one for every player. The boards, will handle those in just a second here. But first let me just find, there we go. So this is the basic starting hand, almost. I'll show you. So it contains these cards, which has 3 threes, 3 fours, 3 ones, and 3 twos. 3 of each, I believe. Yeah, 3 of each. And it has these 3, which is an extra heat. I'll explain what those are later. A 0 and a 5. And these are called upgrades. And these are speed cards or whatever. And this is like the basic starting hand, plus a few things which I will show you in just a second. You need a gear lever, which will start at 1. And you need, of course, a card to put on one of the tracks. Let's get a track out. So, the basic one they tell you to start on is the United States. Because of course it is. It is a very base, it is the most basic track and quite simple, making a lot of noise. Now, there's one thing we need to add to this starting hand here, and that is all explained up in the corner. Let me just try and zoom in so you can see it. Right there, that's a symbol for heat cards and stress cards. We need, for this track, you need 6 heat and 3 stress. Now that is completely, that's the wrong way to zoom. That is completely the same for each of the starting tracks, but in the expansion they change it. I will show you that. But in the box here somewhere, I have extra heat cards and extra stress cards. 1, 2, 3 stress cards which are added to the starting hand, which is of course then shuffled and placed in the draw pile area right here. And then you have 6 heat, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, which is placed in the engine area right here. Alright. And cars, of course, starts at the starting line, so it's up here, and then you have a bunch of numbers from 1 to 8, and that's of course just a random starting order you decide at the beginning. Following to the race, the starting order will be whoever is in the lead and going back. So it can constantly change, but has a very obvious way of checking it. You will be starting with 7 cards, 5, 6, 7, and each turn you will go through steps 1 through to 9. Now some of them are mandatory, which you have to do, some of them you choose yourself. So the first one, which is mandatory to do, is choose which gear to be in. So you start in the first gear, and you can choose to shift up or down. Of course not from first, you can shift down. Shifting from first to second, that's completely fine, you can just do that. If you want to change from first to third, or second to fourth, or fourth to second, or third to first, you know, changing by 2 gears, that will cost you a heat, and whenever it costs you a heat, you take it from the engine into your discard pile. So let's say I did that, and I had this starting, and now I get to play 3 cards. So the gear you're in is the amount of cards you play, and therefore the speed you can move at. Now I'm in the 3rd gear. I'll choose 3 cards. I'm gonna actually just stay in the 2nd gear just to showcase what the blue symbol does. So let's say I was in the 2nd gear and I choose. Then the next step is choosing the amount of cards. So I choose these 2, put them face down, wait for my opponents to have chosen as well, and then in the first step we reveal. Now this is done, these 2 are done simultaneously. these are done in player order. So you reveal. Now you have the stress card, which gives you the boost symbol here. This is the symbol for boost. And what that allows you to do is draw the top card, and as long as it is a driving card, you get to use it. So I draw it up. It's a stress card. Can't be used. Goes into the discard. Okay, that was a bad shuffle clearly. And that's a 2. So I add a 2 to my speed, and I go 7 in total. 5 plus 2. And you can use the tracks down here, like 12 minus 7, that's 5. But you could also just count it out if you want to. Always sticking to the broad white line. On it, there's 2 sides, and on one of the sides it is a thicker white line than the other one. And this can change. For example, in the first corner down here changes to being over here. So you change side as being the lead car. This matters if you go along side by side, because let's say the silver car was in and sitting right alongside me over here. The red car would be starting because it's closer to the thicker white line. And if it was the end of the race, you'd cross the finish line, red car would have been ahead of the silver car because it's closer to the thick line. So that's what that means. Alright, now next step is checking for free stuff. If you are the last driver, or if you're driving 5 and up amount of players, one of the last 2 drivers, you first of all get 1 free move forward. Alright, that's what one symbol means, and you get a free cooldown. And the cooldown, which also you get 1 cooldown in second gear and 3 cooldowns in first gear. It basically means if you have a heat on hand, like this, I get to take it out of my hand and into the car, engine if I have a cooldown. But you get an extra move and an extra cooldown if you are last, or in a 5+ player game, second to last. In the base game you can be 6 players, but with the expansion you can be up to 8. Next thing you check is all of the various different symbols you might have. So, do you have any cooldown? That's now. Do you need to pay any heat? What you've done, that's now. Do you want to boost? Now this is something you can do here, is you can boost. It costs 1 heat, paid from your engine into your discard pile, to then draw up an extra card and boost forward that amount. So this is a 1, so that was a pretty bad trade. One thing that's very, very important to notice, also when the checking corners, I'll get to that. Next thing you do is slipstream. So let's say you ended 1 step behind a car or on the same step as a car. You get to slipstream moving 2 spots. So if you were here, you just get to whoop ahead. Or if you were here, you get to slipstream a little bit further ahead, changing the order from time to time. That's what you do here. And then you check corners. And let me just use this corner down here. So this corner is a 7. So let's say I had played this now, this 7 from here, right? I would go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I would cross this corner with a speed of 7, which is allowed. If, for example, I was the last car, I could still use that extra move or that extra boost, that boost by paying 1 here, but it would add to my speed, and everything I add to my speed I would have to pay here. Now this could be useful. For example, let's say the silver car is here. If I boost, I do have to pay, that's the wrong place, a heat from my engine, because now I'm traveling through a 7 with an 8, so that's 1 more. But I get to slipstream ahead of him, and that doesn't add, those 2 doesn't go on to my total, so I've actually moved 3 steps ahead. It's something to think about when driving, and the most important thing to think about in terms of paying heat for crossing the corner is you get to cool down first. So maybe you are in, I don't know, second gear, and you are the last driver, so you get to have 2 cooldowns, and you might have 2 heat in your hand. You get to pay those 2 heat down, so maybe use to get through a corner a little bit faster. That's something always to think about. The second to last step that you don't have to do is discarding. So let me just take the hand that I have back up here. Let's say this is the position I'm in. I have a 1 and 2 3s and a 0, but I can also see I have 15 spots until I reach the next corner up ahead. So, is this really what I want to continue with? Continue having on hand for the next couple of corners here? Probably not. I might take these 0 and the 1 to get rid of those, and then discard it from my hand, but keep the 3s. Now one thing that's important to know is if it has this symbol right here, you're not allowed to put it in your discard from your hand. Heat goes into the engine, and stress cards, which also have that symbol, needs to be played to get rid of. But now I have 2 cards, and the final step, which you're forced to do, is draw back up to 7. So I would have to draw, 5 cards? 3, 4, 5. And there we go. And look at that, that's a far better hand. 3 4s on my handles and driving up to the next corner. But that is it, changing gears and driving around. One important thing to note is also the information that's up here. Whoopty. It says 69, that's the amount of spots that are on it. Spots you have to go through. 4, that's the amount of corners. And 2 over here, that's the amount of rounds you have to drive. Again, all of the basic tracks in the basic base game, that's 2 rounds you have to go around. But wait, that's wrong. Italy is 3. My favorite track is 3. Stupid. The expansion also brings a 1-track one. But let's talk a little bit about those few modules that I do want to talk about. Because the 2 I want to talk about is the weather module, which needs these things, and the garage module, which needs these cards right here. So I'm not going to talk about the solo gameplay or the championship gameplay. Now the reason I'm going to talk about those is because it's not really relevant for me and enjoying the game. So the weather module, let's start with that one because it's pretty simple. So first of all, you're going to take these big ones here, which have turned either way, shove them up and draw 1 to place over here, and it can change a little bit. So let's see here. So this symbol I'll explain a little bit later, but this one, for example, 3 of the heat that you have is in your pile to start with. This is 1 extra stress card, -1 less heat. The same with 3 heat in your 3 heat start in your discard pile. An extra heat. And 1 less stress card. So that's sort of what you get from that one. And all of them also have this one, but I will again talk about what that does in a second, because you also have these things. And I actually want to start this one. So these ones, now you would shuffle all of them together, and then you would take out the amount that you need per corner that there is, and you would place one out, and either it would look sort of like these here. These change up the corner rule. So this one makes the corner 1 less speed. So for example, that 7 corner over there would be a 6 speed corner. This one makes it 1 extra, so that would be an 8 speed corner. This one means that you pay 1 extra heat if you drive too fast through it. That means if you drove through the 7 speed corner with 9, you would pay 3 heat instead of 2. Now it could also look like this, with the little lines underneath there. And this changes up the straights. So this one gives you a free boost. You can do a completely free boost. It still adds to your speed, of course. This makes slipstream 1 extra move. And this means that whatever the weather module showed up here, this right here, is what counts. So this is, you can't, cooldown on this straight. You get an extra cooldown on this straight. You get +2 to your slipstream on this straight. Get a cooldown, get +2 slipstream, can't slipstream, for example. So it changes up the rules of the straights and the corners just to give it a little bit of, well, it's weather. It changes around. I would love some way where maybe it changed a little bit up in a natural way throughout, like the race, like, oh, you're starting with some sunshine, and then for the second lap, oh, it becomes a little bit cloudy. But unfortunately, due to, of course, this change over here, that is not quite possible. I would love that to be a part of it, but yeah, it's still a really good thing to add. We'll just change it up a little bit. Now, last one is this one, which is the garage module, which has a whole bunch of cards. So now, through this one, you will remove your upgrade cards. So these 3, right? Because you will be drawing up and choosing from this one. So let me draw. So you'll do a snake draft, which means you flip over. Let's say this is a 3-player game. So I will flip over the amount of players +1. So 4. And the first player would choose whichever one he wants. Maybe it's this one. It looks good, but this one, and then, you know, the second player, and then the third player. This one is removed. And then you take out 4 more. 3, 4. And now you start at the last player who might want this one, and he wants this one, and this guy takes this one. And then you have one final drafting where you start again from first player, second last player. That's called a snake draft. And then you have, instead of these 3 basic upgrades, you now have these 3. Did I not? Let me just grab this one just so I have 3. Okay, these 3 more interesting ones. Now, of course, you have 2 gas pedals. That's not very good. Each of them have a name: wings, gas pedal. There's tires. There's 4-wheel drive. There's fuel, air intake, a bunch of different things. Air intake is expansion, actually. And they all sort of do the same. You can see these 2 are gas pedals, and they sort of do the same thing. Maybe this one is just a slightly better because you move a little bit more, right? And they all do a whole bunch of different things. And it runs to take way too long to explain it here. So that's sort of to explore yourself. But that's definitely one to also play with, because again, it gives you just a little bit of specialty. You are a little bit different. Anyways, this was the base game and the 2 base modules. Let's get back up and talk about it. Alright, so that is the first portion of just the base game. I'll save the expansions for it in just a second here. But base game and of course those 2 modules that I talked about. So the base game itself is, I think it's really good. The deck of cards is nice and simple. It's a bit weird the fact that you have upgrade cards in the deck, and you have to sort of, that's basically adding a module from the beginning of those. So I think this idea of adding the modules later to increase the difficulty, it's a little bit weird when they have that in already. But it's, of course, it's not like, if you are like me, you play a lot of the games, it's not difficult to understand. But I think it's a really fun game. Mechanically, this thing of just having these cards and the gear decides how many cards you play, and trying to keep that engine warm enough to go all the way. It's a really nice hand management game, where you also, of course, have that heat thing. I think throwing out cards already and discarding some cards, that's really something that's important, because it's going to give you some control over your hand, and the drawing of cards, the boost, right? Again, these things where you draw, it's the thing that is going to try and give you some kind of control, because the more cards you have in this card pile, the more you know, right? Of course, you can't check your discard pile, so it's about remembering, but the more you know and the more you can control it. But at the same time, there isn't really any card that allows you to draw up cards. In the garage module, of course, there are cards that allow you to put cards back down onto the top of the deck, which I use that quite a lot. If I can get one of those cards, that will probably be in my hand almost always, because that is going to give you a lot of hand control, right? Control of your hand or deck, or what you want to say. So that kind of thing is super awesome to have. But the basic gameplay of it, going around these tracks, which has different lengths, and trying to control both your heat and your hand and your deck, and going through, I think it's really good. We've played a lot just at that one, learning the game, and it's really great. But I can't see it lasting that long. I think that's where the garage and the weather module comes in, to just add that little bit extra, because we've played all these maps so many times. Played Heat a lot, and all the maps have been played through a lot over the years. So it's nice to have the garage and the weather module to come in. I think the one we had the first was the weather module, because again, then you change up some of the corners or some of the straights to just have some more interesting rules to them. I usually do it so that I place all of the weather tokens. You of course only place an amount of them. I think it's based on how many corners there are. But this way you are going to get a lot on all of the straights and all of the corners basically. And I just think that adds a whole lot to the experience of playing Heat, especially with this module, because there's something at every corner. And I think that's way more interesting than just, hey, have at some corners, so to speak. There's always something, but I think it's more interesting that way. And of course, the overall weather thing that can come in, which gives you less stress, less heat, more heat. It's a nice little way of changing up the deck a little bit that you have to work with, to making it more challenging. So I think the weather module is a really great thing to add, and I think it's the first thing you should add. Again, changing up the corner, changing up the straights, so you're getting a different view at the tactics that you can use. And then you have the garage module to add in after that, where of course you put out an amount of cards. That's actually the Danish word for cards. Based on the Class +1. And you have this drafting module where you're trying to sort of have a tiny bit of deck building right at the beginning. And I think it's very interesting. There is of course a thing with the person that chooses last gets probably the worst options. But then again, when you got those options, all of a sudden maybe you can now build a deck around this. I don't think there's, in the first drafting at least, I don't think there's any obvious bad and good choices. That comes later on based on the other cards that you choose to have these 3 extra cards to your hand. I think it's too bad it's only 3. I would like to add 4 or 5 cards of these of this kind to your hand to really have a more interesting deck that way. I've thought about doing one where you split it up, because if you don't know, they're all split up into, you know, tires and brakes and hydraulics and engine and all this kind of stuff. I would like to have done one where you split them up into these decks, and each person, and then we draft those, and each person gets 1 of each. So I think that will add a lot of cards to your deck and make it a bit more interesting. But that's sort of a wild and wonderful thing to do at some point, maybe in the future. But yeah, weather module and garage module, really great additions to a really good base game. Now, before we move on to theme and components, let's have a look at the expansions. Alright, let's talk about the expansions here. Everything is in just the Tunnel Vision expansion box, but of course there are 2 expansions, Heavy Rain and Tunnel Vision. And considering, just remove this, this is on the solo and championship boards that you will need for those modules. I didn't talk about them, so yeah. But let me talk about first Heavy Rain. It's the first expansion. And let me show you Japan here, because that's basically the main map of it. First of all, it adds a orange driver, so now you could be 7 drivers if you had this one. But what it most importantly adds is these watermarks, and over here a chicane. Now that matters mostly for weather module. Let's talk about the most interesting change first of all. As I said, it changed how much heat you have. You now have 7 heat to complete this one. So the big change is of course the watermarks here. Whenever you are in the water, it costs a heat to change gear, no matter how many gears. That's the big change from it. The cards go over here. Those are useful in just a second here. And where did the freaking board go that I had? I'm just gonna need this just to showcase something. Now the chicane over here has 2 corners straight up, which gets the same sort of corner in the weather module. That's basically how it's useful, as both corners is restrained by this corner modification from the weather module, of course. So and it can make it very interesting if they are 1 less or 1 more. But that's basically all the chicanes do, and then they are visually nice to look at. I like the chicanes, actually, it's one of my favorite additions. And the ones at the water spots, you need to pay a gear no matter how many, no matter how many, you're going to change. And what it adds for the garage module is this symbol right here. It adds air intake, which usually have this symbol right here. And what that symbol means is you get to cool down from your discard pile. So this one is 1 cooldown. So if I had this one heat in my discard pile, I would take it from there and into the heat, back into my engine. So changing up the rules around cooldown and being a very useful tool for different parts of racing. Okay, let's get out the other expansion one. Let me just show pretty quick the other side. This Mexico, which has 2 chicanes, but not the watermarks. That's a Japan thing. Alright, the second expansion is called Tunnel Vision, and it adds a purple player, much to the delight of one of the ones we play with. And let's see, it adds the Spain track here, which very importantly, down here, has 109 spots, 11 corners, and you only drive it once. It is straight on Grand Prix. That's the main change for it. It is a massive track. All this is one big track. And it obviously also adds chicanes. You can see there's 2 chicanes on this massive track, but it also adds tunnels. And when you're in tunnels, you're not allowed to discard, right? That final step on the pyramid of things you need to do, that final step, discarding cards before drawing up, you're not allowed to do that when you're in the tunnel. Does that matter? I don't know. And the garage module adds this symbol right here. And what that means is it's extra moves you get as long as you are moving through clean air. So now this is only a 1, so that's pretty simple. If I was like this, 1 step behind my opponent, I would get to move that 1 step ahead. Now let's say it said 3. There's some of that says 3. If I was here, I could do it 1, 2, 3. But if I was here, I couldn't do it 1, 2, 3. Because I have to land on the spot right behind him. Now that means if I was here, I could still do the 1 move. I was here, I could do the 1, 2. But I have to land behind him. Not beside him, but behind him. Let me just get out another drive to show. Case, again, we're assuming you have a move of 3. So let's say this guy was here, and you're here. So you are 3 steps behind this guy, right? 1, 2, 3. But you're not allowed to use it to pass a person. So you would end up here, right behind that one person, because I'm not allowed to use it to pass. It's quite a little bit of a complicated thing to remember, and it's not super useful because it's very situation specific. I wouldn't use it with any less than 5 players, I don't think. But that's basically how it's used, is to just get up the ass of someone. And of course that means you can now slipstream. Like if I end up here, I could slipstream ahead and be between the people. Or again, if one was the 3 steps behind, 1, 2, 3, and slipstream. I mean, amazing. If I then was the last person, 1, 2, 3, my free move and slipstream, and look at how many spaces I've moved. So it can be useful just in specific situations. And that's basically what the expansions add. Nothing much different than that. And there we go, both expansions just quickly put up Heavy Rain and Tunnel Vision. Heavy Rain is of course the first one, so that is the one that actually adds the chicanes. And of course the wet spots in Japan, going for the heavy rain stuff. Now the chicanes, I think, is an all-round great addition. This thing of double corners, especially playing with the weather module, where you have 2 corners. Maybe they're increased a bit, maybe they're decreased a bit. Maybe they cost extra heat to go through. Really this change, because that can really make or break a game, a race, if you can get through those faster or slower or whatever. And with the garage module having some insane combos, it's a super interesting map with those chicanes. There's sort of the wet spots where you can down or up shift, or at least it costs heat, you know, to do, and a 1 up shift or 1 down shift, where normally it's cost you 1 if you do twice. That is an interesting enough addition. I think it is. It does make you think more about where you end up when you go for a drive, right? Because it's usually up towards a corner, so sure, we're on a straight right now, but do I want to just go for it, or do I want to just be in that second gear, getting ready for a 3-speed corner, maybe because of the water that's on the track. So it does give you something interesting to talk about, but it also just rolls around maybe just saving up on heat. If you can have heat, you can constantly change gears, and it isn't a massive challenge. So whilst I do like while I do think it gives you something to think about when choosing the cards you are going to play and the amount of cards and stuff, it's not the greatest addition in the world to this game. Tunnel Vision again has just basically the chicanes again. It is not an addition from Heavy Rain, but I love those again. I really like the chicanes. And it has this massive Spain track with a bunch of tunnels. And the tunnels are interesting enough, you can't discard when you're in there. If your game revolves a lot around constantly discarding and getting new cards up, I can see that is annoying. But I think it's something that you can easily move around. It's not going to be difficult to get around. Sorry. It's not going to be difficult to get around not discarding cards. At least I didn't think so. Like, I felt like the tunnels did nothing. The thing that was very interesting was that massive Spain track that is 1 round around this massive track. It was super fun. It was a lot. It's super fun, and adding all those weather tokens really made it really fun. So I think it's a great map. the tunnel part just doesn't really add anything for me. But the maps I'll talk about a little bit later. Now let's talk about components. I think it's components first. So the cards are a fine quality. Having played them quite a lot, there isn't a lot of wear and tear on them already, so that's a bonus right there. It isn't going to be. It's going to be a while before they perish, so to speak. So I think it's a good quality print on the cards, and they have a good thickness and feel good in hand. Like they have a good size. Then you have, of course, the gear shift and the little cars, and I think they're great. It's such an awesome thing to have. This gear that changes in the cars. They look amazing. You could have some details on them. Not so many, so you are thinking like, oh, how did they do that? But enough to where you are impressed by it. And of course, again, the gear shift is such a great thing. The little plaque you have yourself is, of course, very thin and loosey, and it's okay. I mean, everything is stuck into your cards and your gear shift, so that thing is just to be there. But I think the artwork they put on it to make it look like the cockpit of a car, massive upgrade. Really a great thing to have. Looking really good on the table. And then you have the maps themselves. It is a board like we know it. I think it's very reminiscent of the Team boards that you fold out. Good quality. They don't feel like they're falling apart when you fold them out. They are just all around very good. And that's about all the components that there is to talk about. All around, I love the production. Days of Wonder always does a great job with that. And let's now talk about theme, because the theme is oozing in this one. I really think that there is a great deal of theme in Heat here. Even my friend who knows nothing about racing and doesn't really care for Formula 1 racing kind of gets into the theme when we're playing this game. Because it makes sense, you are taking some risks, you are deciding which gears to be in, coming over in a corner, how long do you want to drive in a high gear, and changing down, and sometimes you make a double shift, and that is something that tears a little bit on the engine. It's not a super healthy thing to do. So yeah, and the stress cards is such a great thing where sometimes you just, a second you lose focus, it's difficult, maybe you don't get into the corner like you want to. So I really think that there's a lot of theme to be had in this one. Super great. The racetracks maybe aren't super thematic, I mean some of them are, but they don't look like actual race places. I mean, the thing you got first was a map in the US, not super much like, but you do have the United Kingdom and France, which have racetracks. So, yeah, and having so much water on track and stuff, it's not super thematic in the sense of the tracks. Those are mainly made for, of course, gameplay wise, and of course the same with the weather module. It's some of the things for the weather module make sense, sort of to say wind blows or a little bit rain comes in or something. But again, it's mostly a gameplay thing. The garage module do make sense. I mean, different teams, they do have to follow the same constraints, but they do go for different things. Some people focus on the suspension, some people focus on the traction, all these kinds of things. So it makes sense to have a little bit of difference there, whilst overall keeping it the same. That's also why, when I say gameplay wise, I would love to have more than just the 3 cards. But 3 cards makes sense. You have some upgrades, but overall the cards are within the same constraints and have to fit into the same little box of rules, but with some difference, in each corner of the box, so to speak. So thematically, it's really, really great. I don't know if there's some tunnels, but the tunnel vision stuff is a little bit extreme, I think. Of course, one thing that is also quite thematic, actually, just to note, is that on the Japan map there is a bridge going over parts of the track, which in the real life Japanese Grand Prix, the Suzuka Grand Prix, there is a part of the track where you do that. So it is actually kind of realistic. Anyways, so that is theme. Does it lie to you? Where do we have that? Sometimes Days of Wonder likes to hide it from us. Oh wait, this is the expansion one. So it says +1 and adds a player, fair enough. It says here 1 to 6, 10 and up, 60 minutes. The 60 minutes is of course just for one track. 1 to 6 players is accurate. Each expansion box will say +1 and it's accurate. I can't remember what the highest we've driven at 5. We have driven at a full 6, I think. We haven't tried a 7 or 8 player game yet. Hoping to do that. but the more players you are, there's more chaos, and it's actually a bit more fun because more overtaking, more slipstream. We have race 2 and 3 as well, and it gets a little bit more boring. There isn't as much slipstream, there's a little bit of space in between. So it is more fun with more players because you are going to be a little bit tighter, and every mistake is going to cost you gravely. So the player count is, I absolutely agree with it, but you should play higher. Of course not the one. I actually know something about the one player solo play game here where you have these legends in. And the way I have read it and heard about how it plays, it sounds absolutely awful. I just have to say, but I don't know, I haven't played it, so. But it sounds awful. Other than that, of course, you have the 10 and up age, which is fairly accurate. I mean, it is simple enough. Wanting to add the modules is going to be maybe higher up in age, or you have played it a bit. But just the base game, you can go fairly young because it is very simple, you know. If you put down a 5, he's going to move 5 spots. There's a line where it says 3, you can move past it with more than 3. Or it's a punishment. So it's fairly simple, and I think you could go a little bit younger in age. About 60 minutes. A race is going to be about an hour, yeah. If you're going to go for like the campaign or something, it is going to be longer than that. And I do think with the garage module, the drafting, it can drag a little bit as you consider your options and trying to remember, especially that last drafting when you have 2 cards already, which one will fit. So that will make it a little bit longer, but the driving itself and getting around, it shouldn't be much more than that. It should be about an hour, maybe a little bit less if you have experience, but an hour is fairly accurate. So, what is going to be my final score for Heat, Peloton Metal, and the 2 expansions? So Heat itself, I have already rated it earlier, it is a 9. So the reason that it is not going up to 10 is I think there is a little bit too much luck in it. There is quite a lot of luck in drawing up the correct cards. Like if I'm going for a stress one, I might have calculated that I have 2 2s and a 1 down here. And the best would be to draw the 2s, but then I draw the 1. Or maybe there's a 3 to 2s and a 1, and it's like, as long as I don't draw the 3, I'm good, and then I draw the 3, and that's, you know, then it's kind of just unlucky, and other times it can be lucky. So there's a little bit much of that in here for my tastes, but there's a lot of ways to getting around it and trying to avoid those stress cards, of course. So it's not super terrible, but there's just a little bit too luck for me. Let's talk about the Tunnel Vision expansion and the Heavy Rain expansion. So I think the Heavy Rain expansion is better. It also, I'm gonna give Heavy Rain the chicanes. That's the one that introduces the chicanes. It was the first one. Tunnel Vision have them as well, but Heavy Rain introduces them, and I'm gonna give them a point for that because that's the expansion that introduces them. So therefore, it is going to be rated high. Also, I think just the rain part is a more interesting addition than the tunnel part. So Heavy Rain is gonna get a 10 out of 10 in my expansion rating. I should talk about that at some point, what the difference has been between a board game and an expansion rating. But yeah, Heavy Rain gets a 10 out of 10 expansion rating. Really a great addition. The chicanes is amazing. Both tracks are really cool, and that rain part is definitely something interesting and to think more about when racing around the track. Also, it introduces more and less. More heat and less heat, and more stress and less stress, right? I can't remember how it is, but I think Japan gives you 1 more heat to use. Mexico gives you 1 less stress, right? So it also introduces that change, which is not in the television one. So that's another great thing, to just have this difference of, okay, I have a bit more here, or I have a bit less here, or whatever. Tunnel Vision still gets a... It's gonna get an 8 out of 10. And the reason it's gonna get an 8 out of 10, it still introduced the chicanes, which I think is absolutely the best thing from the expansions. The maps are very interesting. I mean, Netherlands is a fine, good map. Spain is super interesting with that long ass track. But what drags us down is that the main thing, the tunnel vision thing, I just find a bit boring. Sure, you can discard cards, and in circumstances that can be quite annoying. But it's not something that I would think super much about, opposite in Heavy Rain, the rain parts. So it drags down because of that. So an 8 out of 10 for Tunnel Vision, 10 out of 10 for Heavy Rain, and a 9 out of 10 for Heat, Peloton Metal. Am I keeping it? Well, my good friend would be very sad if I got rid of it because he loves the game. He might want to purchase it of me, but he loves the game and I'm keeping it because I really think it's a really good fun game that I can bring out most places. So thank you very much for watching another video from me, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!